Understanding how sensory processing disorders relate to learning disabilities is really interesting. This also goes along with nervous system regulation issues, but I'm not going to get into the details of how that works so much because it's complicated. Anyway, basically, we need to understand and respect that all of the information we receive to help us navigate in the world comes through our senses. So, if we're having a processing disorder with that, what it means is like imagine that we have mail carriers at all of our senses who are passing off packages every second, or half a second, or two-thirds of a second, and they're passing them off to, say, the brain. And all of the different regions in the brain are receiving and passing mail at different intervals as well. Well, if our intervals aren't matching up, then every single time that happens, a piece of mail is getting dropped. And that piece of mail has nuanced information about the world that our brain needs in order to process it better. And further than that, that nuanced information needs to be able to go within the brain into certain different regions in order to get processed a certain way. Like you can't take like a piece of information about auditory and then send it to the nose because then you have synesthesia. And some of us have that, but usually that doesn't work that way. So when we're talking about learning disabilities, we're talking about the fact that certain information literally isn't making it into the brain to get processed. So it's not there for that person. It's like understanding that our visual representation of the world is like a digital rendering, basically. And what we see can change immensely depending on the function of our brain and our neurochemicals and our wiring and all of that. I mean, a quick example of that is someone who hurt their brain and sees everything in fractals. Anyway. That's a lot of information to try to talk about. This matters because it makes learning really difficult because, in my personal experience, if things aren't functioning in a coherent manner, the information that gets sent to my brain, the thoughts that I experience and think that are mine, might say something like, hey, you can't apply for that job because you're not qualified. And then they just stop there or they loop again and again and again and again because something's not getting processed properly. Whereas, oh, that's right. When things are in a more coherent fashion, which is something that you gain from nature or music or dance, because they all have a natural rhythm to it that the body can actually sync up to and helps things flow better, then that same issue might come through and we might say, hey, you can't apply for that job because you're not qualified for it. But if you did this really quick course, then you would feel more qualified for it. And then you could apply for the job. And these are two very different thoughts that lead to two very different experiences and actions. So, a sensory processing disorder or learning disability doesn't inherently mean that the person is stupid or incompetent or lazy in any sense of the word. It just means that they're getting different information than the other person is, and they might be getting less of the information that the other person finds important, or less of the information that is important for learning in a specific, like doing action outward facility faculty. So when we're trying to deal with people who have sensory processing disorders or learning disabilities, like I have really struggled with in life at certain points, what we really need is just environments that help us feel coherent so that the information can get passed through better, and people who are aware of what the problem is so that they can help not make you feel like you're stupid and you can't do it, because then every time you look at something, that just becomes the information that comes up in your head. That is the way that the male network becomes wired, is you can't do this because everybody always says you're so dumb. And that's not very helpful, because that's not the problem at all. You just can't do this right now because you're missing a piece of information. And if you look at this problem again from a different place, like in the middle of the park, or with a relaxing weekend, or with someone you really trust, more of that information might make it through. And you need to trust that those two different experiences with those two different pieces of information, neither of them define you and neither of them define how smart you are. They're just defining what could get processed at that moment in time. And that's why it's really weird to be human, and also really important to talk about this inside stuff, because I don't really know anybody else who does that. So if this was helpful to you at all with an understanding of like a very brief top level overview of what it actually means to have a sensory processing disorder and learning disabilities at certain times in your life or all of your life, then please let me know, because I feel weird talking about this, but I also feel like it's really, really cool and it's really, really important to understand for some of us. Okay, take care.